asset for future generations and for the village's history, the residents themselves have sincerely documented their memories. Their love for the village has transformed narrow alleyways into playgrounds full of laughter and old, worn walls into vibrant, cheerful spaces. By actively documenting their memories and engaging with the community, the residents themselves share in the spreading happiness.
Have you ever wondered just what it is?
And so, the history of Cheongdam Village has been built up little by little.
아, 여기 그 말씀하셨던 팝콘 파시는 파셔갖고 여기다 또 보태주시고.
For some, Cheongdam is where they found their greatest happiness in life. That's why, even without being asked, the residents continue to build and cherish those memories, one layer at a time.
I know it's really rather stupid of me.
저도 나이가 들어가고 있고요. 그런데 저희가 생활하면서 이 지역을 돌면서 어느 순간 없어져 가는 것들이 있는 것 같아요. 물론 작은 변화라고 할 수 있지만 그게 결국은 없어지면 우리가 기억도 희미해지고 이런데 결국은 남는 건 사진이나 글 이런 자료인 것 같아요. 그래서 저희 몇몇 사람들이 나름 이 지역에서 없어져 가는 것에 대한 아쉬움 이런 것 때문에 그런 기록에 남기고자 애쓰고 있는데요. 무슨 막 재원이 있는 것도 아니고 그래서 되게 소소하게 하고 있습니다.
요즘은 이웃 간에 이렇게 관심도 없고 사람들과의 이 소통도 단절된 시대인데 오늘 이곳을 방문해 보니까 이웃 간의 정을 느낄 수 있었고 또 소중한 공간과 좋은 추억들이 함께하는 그런 곳이 아니었나 생각이 듭니다. 아무쪼록 사람들의 인정을 많이 느낄 수 있는 이곳에서 오래오래 좋은 추억들 많이 간직하셨으면 좋겠습니다.
Held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Team Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. A U.S.-Iran agreement to extend the ceasefire between the two countries has reportedly been signed and is now in effect, days ahead of a planned in-person ceremony in Switzerland. Under the 14-point deal, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, in exchange for sanctions relief and a $300 billion reconstruction fund. The U.S. Federal Reserve has kept interest rates steady, but signaled a more hawkish outlook, with 9 Fed members indicating they expect rates to be raised before the end of the year. The move sent stocks lower and boosted the U.S. dollar against major currencies. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has wrapped up his 10-day trip to Europe. Before returning home, he joined world leaders for talks on global economic imbalances and briefly met with U.S. President Donald Trump and discussed efforts to maintain peace on the Korean Peninsula. The United States and Iran have reportedly signed a ceasefire deal ahead of schedule, opening a 60-day window for nuclear talks while restoring shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
The United States and Iran appear to have inched closer to implementing their ceasefire agreement after both sides remotely signed a memorandum of understanding aimed at ending the conflict and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. According to US officials cited by Axios, President Donald Trump signed the document on Wednesday, days ahead of a planned in-person ceremony in Switzerland. Earlier on Wednesday, the Trump administration released a full text of the 14-point memorandum agreed by Washington and Tehran, declaring an immediate and permanent end to military operations, including in Lebanon. The US will begin lifting its maritime blockade immediately, while Iran will work to restore the free movement of commercial vessels through the critical Strait of Hormuz and return shipping levels to normal. Iran will remove mines and coordinate with Gulf states on the future management of the waterway. The two sides also agreed to a 60-day negotiating period aimed at reaching a broader agreement on Iran's nuclear program. Tehran also reaffirmed that it will not develop nuclear weapons, while both sides agreed to negotiate the future of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile under the oversight of the International Atomic Energy Agency. In return, Washington is offering significant economic incentives, including sanctions relief, waivers for Iranian oil exports, and a proposed reconstruction and development package worth at least $300 billion. Speaking in France after the agreement was unveiled, Trump made clear that any economic benefits would depend on Iranian compliance. He warned that if Tehran fails to honor the agreement or refuses to reach a final nuclear settlement, Washington could resume military action.
And it's a memorandum of understanding. If it doesn't get done in 60 days, that's all right. We go back to bombing. You know, I don't want to do that because it's so good. But we might have to because we're never going to let them have a nuclear weapon.
Trump said the deal also sidesteps a catastrophe for the global economy and renewed turmoil in energy markets. The focus now shifts to Switzerland, where US and Iranian negotiators are expected to begin talks on a comprehensive agreement covering Iran's nuclear program, sanctions relief, and regional security issues. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left interest rates unchanged but signaled a more hawkish outlook, with several policymakers expecting rates to move higher before the end of the year. The prospect of tighter monetary policy rattled financial markets, sending stocks lower, Treasury yields higher, and boosting the U.S. dollar. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The U.S. Federal Reserve on Wednesday left its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 3.5 to 3.75%, marking its fourth consecutive meeting without a rate move and its first policy decision under new chair Kevin Warsh. The Federal Open Market Committee unanimously voted to keep rates steady as policymakers assessed the economic impact of the ongoing U.S.-Israeli war against Iran and a recent surge in inflation.
As you saw a few moments ago, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the Fed funds rate at 3.5% to 3.75% in support of the Fed's dual mandate. Economic activity is expanding at a solid pace, despite elevated uncertainty that owes in part to the conflict in the Middle East.
While the Fed held rates steady for now, its latest projections signaled a more hawkish outlook. The median forecast indicates that the federal funds rate will end the year at 3.8%, higher than the 3.4% projected in March. In addition, 9 of the 19 Fed officials indicated they expect interest rates to be higher by the end of the year. Warsh did not submit a projection in the Fed's closely watched dot plot. Wall Street on Wednesday reacted negatively to the prospect of tighter monetary policy. U.S. stocks closed sharply lower, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average falling 0.97%. The S&P 500 dropped 1.21%, while the Nasdaq Composite lost 1.34%. Treasury yields moved higher as investors increased their bets on a rate hike later this year. The yield on the 2-year Treasury note jumped 17 basis points to 4.21%, while the benchmark 10-year yield rose to 4.499%. The stronger rate outlook also boosted the U.S. dollar. The dollar index, which tracks the greenback against 6 major currencies, climbed 0.9% to 100.45. The Fed's latest decision suggests policymakers remain cautious about inflation risks, while markets are increasingly preparing for the possibility of higher borrowing costs in the months ahead. 이승재, Arirang News.
And now for more on the Fed's rate decision, we're joined today by Greg Bushak, professor of finance at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, Stanford University. Professor Bushak, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So this was Kevin Warsh's first policy meeting as Fed chair. What do you make of the Fed's rate decision?
So Kevin Warsh, he was just confirmed as Fed chair. He replaced Jerome Powell. Trump had kind of been fighting publicly with Powell really over a lot of these Fed rate decisions. So it's really interesting to see this. Powell's term expired. Warsh was Trump's pick. But he's sort of widely viewed as being very qualified, professional, very independent. And I kind of would expect, given the current situation that I think we'll get into in a little bit, he very well may break with the president's desire for lower rates. So his reputation is as an inflation hawk, meaning there's some expectation he'll be more aggressive at managing inflation. And with that said, today the Fed held rates steady. They targeted a range of 3.5% to 3.75%. And one of the things that Warsh emphasized was price stability, which suggests the Fed is going to be taking inflation very seriously in the coming months. And that's really what I was expecting, and I think that's sort of what the broader market was expecting too.
I see 9 Fed members indicated they expect to raise interest rates by the end of the year. This is a significant change in sentiment from the Fed's previous projection, right?
That's right. So the Fed thinking is sort of trading off unemployment versus inflation. That's kind of the dual mandate that Chairman Warsh referenced in his remarks. Now, lower rates, they tend to spur investment, hiring, spending. They kind of make asset prices like stock prices or home prices increase. And higher rates do the opposite. So sort of the thinking at the Fed and among economists is when the labor market's weak, you want to lower rates. When inflation is too high, you want to raise rates to kind of cool things off. Now, like the unemployment situation is pretty good. There's a 4.3% unemployment rate. That's kind of on the lower side. There was recently a fairly positive jobs number in May. People have for a while kind of been waiting for the bottom to fall out of the U.S. labor market, but so far it's kind of held on. On the other hand, inflation is too high. Okay, the Fed's kind of long-term target is around 2% year over year. And for the past few years, it's been stubbornly in this kind of 2.5% to 3% range. And actually, there have been market increases since March. And actually, the latest monthly number was 4.2% year over year. And that's really far outside of the Fed's target. And that kind of unambiguously calls for rate increases.
I see. And as for other major economies, Japan's central bank has increased its main interest rate to a new 31-year high following a surge in global energy prices. And this, comes after the European Central Bank raised rates last week. So what do these decisions suggest about the current state of the global economy, and how could they affect the Fed's decision moving forward?
Yeah, I think this really reflects kind of a global economy that's concerned about high energy prices, partly coming from what's going on in the Middle East. Energy prices are high worldwide, and it's kind of the natural central bank reaction to raise interest rates in response to that. Now, raising interest rates doesn't magically fix sort of the conflict in the Middle East, but it can clamp down on sort of energy demand in the short run and keep inflation from settling in. Again, sort of raising rates tends to reduce spending. If there's less energy that people can buy, then we want to make people want to buy less, and that will keep prices down. Now, the Japan thing, it's always sort of notable when Japan raises rates in particular. They famously spent something like 30 years at essentially 0% interest rates, and their breaking from that is pretty significant. Now, as for how this impacts the Fed's decision, I would view this more as providing kind of external data to the Fed. The idea is that many countries are sort of concerned about higher prices. This suggests that the Fed should also be concerned about it. I think unlike a lot of smaller countries like Japan or Korea, the U.S. doesn't really face a lot of pressure to follow or keep pace with other central banks' rate decisions. For a country like Korea, this is really important because interest rate differentials dramatically impact exchange rates, they impact currency flows. When you're a relatively small economy that relies a lot on exports, this is a huge deal for you. Now, and it really constrains what the central bank can do. That doesn't apply so much to the US because really the US is so large and so much trade is invoiced in US dollars anyway. Exposure to other countries' policy rates is a lot lower.
And all this comes as, the Trump administration announced details of the agreement to end the conflict with Iran. Many analysts expect that it's unlikely that oil and gas prices will return to pre-war levels for months, even if the Strait of Hormuz reopens. But could the deal still provide some relief for global energy markets?
Yeah, I think it's sort of going to reduce risk premium a little bit and provide some relief. Now, kind of broader context, oil prices peaked at about $100 per barrel. They haven't really been above this, and they've come down a lot, even as the conflict has been ongoing. And I think a question you could ask is, why haven't they been higher? Why haven't they increased as the conflict hasn't resolved? So I think first, countries like the US and China, they've been tapping into their strategic oil reserves. Okay, so the US just has a lot of oil that's saved up, and they can deploy oil from that to kind of dampen these supply shocks. Okay, so these reserves, they run out eventually, but so far they've been sort of keeping prices from getting really out of control. Second, I think it's important to remember people are super adaptable. There are other routes, either in the long run or the short run, to going through the strait. At a certain price point for oil, these alternate routes or alternate technologies for transferring oil become more feasible, and that's going to keep a lid on prices. Also, there's alternative sources of energy. Like, for example, I have an electric car, so I just haven't really felt this directly. People respond to these price incentives by sort of substituting away from really expensive routes or expensive energy. And then I think third, markets are already sort of pricing in an end to the conflict to some extent. So we're not going to see a huge oil price reaction as sort of things play out as people expect them to play out. Now, that's all to say, prices are still about $15 to $20 above their pre-conflict levels. I'd expect them to decline a little bit, but there probably isn't a ton of room for them to fall dramatically. I'll also just say, at this point, until we see the sort of the truce more established, I'm a little bit skeptical that this deal will really open the straits to shipping traffic in the long term. I think it a little bit remains to be seen whether it will hold or not.
I see. We'll have to see how that plays out. All right, Professor Bushak, thanks for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.
President Lee Jae-myung is on his way back to Korea after attending this year's G7 summit in France. On Wednesday, he joined world leaders for discussions on global economic imbalances, sustainable growth, and artificial intelligence. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yu-jin has a wrap-up.
The final day of this year's G7 summit began with the working session on reviving a balanced, shared, and sustainable economic growth for all. Speaking at Wednesday's session, President Lee Jae-myung said global economic imbalances should be tackled through dialogue and solidarity rather than blame. He also called for stronger cooperation to strengthen the resilience of global energy supply chains as the war in the Middle East has fueled concerns over oil supplies and inflation.
President Lee proposed that energy importing countries, particularly those in the Asia-Pacific region, move beyond responding individually and strengthen practical cooperation through information sharing, early warning systems, emergency coordination, and efforts to stabilize oil and petroleum product supply chains.
The session was followed by a working lunch where world leaders and tech giants discussed artificial intelligence. President Lee emphasized the importance of narrowing the global AI divide while ensuring AI remains safe, transparent, and accountable. Korea endorsed 7 of the 8 documents adopted during the 2-day meeting of the G7 members and 5 invited countries. Leading up to the G7, attention was on whether President Lee would hold a bilateral meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines. Although no official summit took place, the Blue House said on Wednesday that the two leaders exchanged views on the Korea-US alliance and the Korean Peninsula over Tuesday's gala dinner.
President Trump reaffirmed his strong commitment to playing whatever role is necessary to advance peace on the Korean Peninsula and said he would remain in close communication with President Lee on the matter.
Posting a photo of himself with Trump on X, Lee wrote that the two had a candid 90-minute discussion that produced meaningful progress. He added that President Trump had invited him and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung to play golf. After returning to Korea on Thursday, President Lee is expected to shift his focus back to domestic affairs. On Friday, he will chair a meeting with his top aides to review the country's summer emergency preparedness. 송유진, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae-myung has also held his first summit with Kenyan President William Ruto on the sidelines of the G7 summit. The two leaders agreed on Wednesday to deepen cooperation in economic development, infrastructure, and people-to-people exchanges. President Ruto praised Korea's rapid rise to an advanced economy, saying Kenya hopes to learn from Korea's experience. He replied that Korea stands ready to be a reliable partner in Kenya's development. Both countries attended this year's G7 summit as invited partners. Korea is no longer just a culture to view online, with the Korean wave making it something they can now experience firsthand. From K-food and K-beauty to K-pop, one event in Paris is showcasing what Korea has to offer. Our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo reports.
To get a bowl of Korean ramen and tteokbokki, you need to join a long queue in France. At least that's the case this week at K-Expo, being held as Korea and France celebrate 140 years of diplomatic ties.
One of the fastest ways to understand a culture is through its food. And here at the K-Expo, people just don't see Korea, they taste it. From instant tteokbokki, spicy ramen, to seafood specialties from Korea's coastlines, this food zone is bringing Korean flavors straight to Paris.
We can experience really, I think, the whole culture. I feel like there's more and more exhibitions and fair about Korea, mostly in Paris, but maybe it should be not only in Paris.
Demand was so high that some food booths ran out of products hours before closing time. At the beauty zone, visitors lined up to try Korean skincare products and receive personalized consultations.
If I wake up tomorrow and my skin feels good, I will try to find the product or a similar one. There's a lot of shops in Paris, so it's really easy to find the K-beauty products here.
The energy continued in the evening with the K-pop concert featuring 6 acts, including Monsta X and NCT Wish, drawing thousands of fans. A2 Major also held a mini fan meeting, giving fans a chance to meet the group up close.
I tried my chance to go to the fan sign, but sadly I wasn't selected. So I just came here to see them, because even though I wasn't chosen, since I really like them a lot, I just seeing them is already a lot for me.
For organizers, the event is about creating stronger cultural ties between the two countries.
I hope this serves as an opportunity for young people in France to gain a deeper understanding of Korean culture beyond what they've seen so far. As the government and private sector continue to expand exchanges, I believe that by the time we celebrate the 150th anniversary, Korea and France will feel less like distant countries and more like close neighbors.
The cultural exchange is also generating business opportunities. Organizers have set a business consultation target of $400 million, connecting Korean companies with European buyers and turning cultural interest into economic opportunity. Business meetings continue through Friday as Korea looks to further expand the global reach of K-culture into business partnerships. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News, Paris.
South Africa will be without a key player for the rest of the World Cup group stage as midfielder Zwane has been handed a 3-match suspension after being sent off in South Africa's opening match against Mexico. FIFA announced the ban on Wednesday, citing the serious foul play that led to Zwane's red card. Unless South Africa wins an appeal, he will miss the team's next match against Czech Republic on June 19th and their final Group A match against South Korea on June 25th. The suspension is a major setback for South Africa as the team pushes for a place in the knockout rounds.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces voter anger heading into an election this autumn as the interim U.S. deal with Iran ended the war long before Israel's goals were achieved. Netanyahu confirmed this week he will run again in an election that must be called by October. Opinion polls put his right-wing coalition on course to lose. President Trump chose to end the wars in Iran and Lebanon before Israel achieved lasting victories. Netanyahu also faces corruption charges and criticism over the security failings of the October 2023 Hamas attack. Opposition leader Yair Lapid said Netanyahu lost the war and collapsed at the moment of truth. 1 month after the World Health Organization declared Congo's Ebola outbreak an international emergency, the number of confirmed cases has reached 800, with warnings that the outbreak could become the worst on record. Tens of thousands of contacts remain untraced. A WHO report found roughly a third of new case alerts in the worst-hit province of Ituri were going unanswered. Burial and decontamination teams also say they have only about 15% of the personnel and 7% of the vehicles they need. Dozens of medics have caught the Bundibugyo strain, for which there is no proven vaccine or treatment. U.S. President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held their first meeting since early 2025 at the G7 summit in France on Wednesday, discussing trade deals and the safety of Indian sailors in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump called Modi a, quote, tough negotiator and said he would visit India in the future. The two leaders last met in February 2025, but ties have since deteriorated over high U.S. tariffs on Indian goods and Washington's closeness with India's rival, Pakistan. Relations were further strained by killing of 3 Indian sailors in the U.S. Navy attacks on commercial ships. Modi told Trump the safety of Indian seafarers in the Hormuz region was of utmost importance and should receive priority in implementing the Iran peace agreement. Soccer superstars Lionel Messi and Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe all scored in Tuesday's World Cup matches. Messi scored his first World Cup hat-trick in Argentina's 3-0 win over Algeria, drawing level with the tournament's all-time record scorer Miroslav Klose on 16 goals. The Argentine scored his first World Cup goal on the same date 20 years earlier when he was 18. Meanwhile, Mbappe netted twice in France's 3-1 win over Senegal to become his country's all-time top scorer with 58 goals. Haaland and England's Harry Kane also scored 2 goals in their opening games.
Many of us will need to stay prepared for both the heat and passing showers again today. The first heat advisories of the summer have been issued for parts of Daegu and Gyeongsang-do provinces. Then scattered showers are expected for most of the inland areas with 5 to 40 millimeters expected along with thunderstorms. Then this afternoon, Seoul and Daegu will be getting up to sizzling 32 degrees Celsius. Chuncheon and Daejeon will make it to 31 degrees. Meanwhile, the capital area will be under sunny skies with very strong UV rays. Some welcome news. The hot weather will ease with nationwide rain on Saturday, bringing much needed cooler conditions to the country. So please hang in there.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Thursday, June 18th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Also, Chun's with us.
Good morning, Soo-jin.
Have you? And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're now headed toward the end of the work week, and for many of us, that means one thing, that we may be nearing payday. But these days, as cash becomes increasingly rare and digital payments take over, fewer people are actually holding physical money in their hands. Yet, despite the rise of cards and mobile payments, cash hasn't actually disappeared completely. So, Jian, what do you still use cash for if you use them at all?
Not really, not that much. But like other people these days, I rely heavily on my credit card or mobile payments rather than using cash. But having said that, I do use cash from time to time. I prepare cash every single week for church offering, and I also keep some coins for vending machines because my children, they fancy a cup of yulmu, which is a Korean traditional grain drink, and also they love drinking those vending machines hot cocoa. And another occasion is my child's nursery school. They have this bank tour every single week. They go there in order to have in order to learn and develop their saving habits. So they go to the bank. That means he needs cash. So I prepare a small amount of money for him. So in fact, these days I do believe that cash is used so rarely nowadays. Many children probably won't know whose face appears on the banknotes. But that raises an interesting question here. When do children actually come into contact with cash these days? When is it?
I guess when they go to their nursery?
Or pocket money.
Oh.
Yes, when the elderly, usually in Korea, when the elderly sees the children, the grandchildren, they give money, pocket money. So they prefer giving pocket money rather than transferring money by bank. So pocket money at the time. So cash may be fading away, but it's certainly not retired yet.
So there's still a good amount of places where they get exposed to cash, and then they use cash as well. So what about you, Kyle?
I miss receiving pocket money, by the way. Oh my God. So I don't usually carry a lot of cash, but when the weather starts getting chilly, I make sure to have at least 5,000 Korean won in my wallet. To be honest, I hate how freezing Korean winters are, but 붕어빵 is the exact and the only reason why I look forward to the season. So for those watching News Gen who might not know what 붕어빵 is, it's a hot fish-shaped Korean snack that's crispy on the outside and filled with sweet red bean or custard cream on the inside. Super delicious. They are actually sold by street vendors, and most of them don't accept cards. So I love Korean street food so much that I actually carry cash just to buy them. But other than that, I rarely have a reason to use cash these days. The most annoying part about cash is definitely the change. So since people barely use cash these days, wallets are getting smaller and thinner. You can barely fit like few cards. So when I end up with small bills or coins, I never know where to put them or when I'll ever spend them. So just 4 or 5 coins can make my pocket feel super heavy. The loose bills are easy to lose as well. So personally, I would much rather have my small pennies safely tucked away in my banking app, not in my wallet.
Right, so it's interesting that cash has gone from everyday necessity to something we mostly keep around for special occasions or special snacks. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. In an age where you can pay with just a tap of your phone, the importance of carrying cash has steadily declined. But recently, cash has been making a comeback, not as a means of payment, but as merchandise. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at the surprising boom in cash merchandise and explore the stories and symbols hidden in the currency we use every day, and some of the most fascinating facts about money from around the world. Just as we saw in a video, cash may be disappearing from our wallets, but it's finding new life in merchandise. So this is kind of an unexpected trend from my perspective. So why are the young consumers carrying around banknotes again, Gia?
Good question. Yes, as you mentioned, cash, we don't use cash that often, but the thing is, banknotes are reappearing in a rather unexpected way. In Korea, there's even a cushion filled with shredded banknotes inspired by Korean expressions, sitting on a pile of money cushion, which means becoming wealthy. Or you have money, the money comes to you. And the Korea Minting and Security Printing Cooperation has also found success with a range of money-themed merchandise, including pens, calendars, and decorative dried Polak containing fragments of real banknotes. Then why dried Polak? Well, dried Polak is traditionally associated with wealth and good fortune in Korea. That's why they have a merchandise with dried Polak. And what makes these items particularly appealing is their symbolism, the meaning they have, because they contain genuine currency. Many people view them as a symbol of prosperity, wealth, good luck, and financial success as well. So it's no surprise that they have been flying off the shelves right now. People love to buy those items. So it seems that even in a cashless society, people still have those money close at hand.
I mean, a cushion filled with this like cash sounds so interesting. I feel like I'm pretty superstitious, so I will be looking into that. And what's even more interesting is that this is trying to emerge from a challenge facing the Korea Minting and Security Printing Corporation. So, but how did discarded banknotes become such a hit business, Kyle?
So, you might be wondering, why on earth is Korea Minting and Security Printing Corporation going through all the trouble of shredding actual cash just to put it in the, what was it, cushion?
Right.
So, well, this was actually their genius way to solving a huge problem. You see, the paper fragments used in these items are actually production scraps, not an actual cash, including misprints and old banknotes returned to the Bank of Korea. And don't be surprised, the total amount reaches around 500 tons every single year. 500 tons of cash. I can't even imagine how much money that is. Honestly, that should have been my pocket.
Relatable.
What a loss. Anyways, before this, the Korean Minting and Security Printing Corporation was super cautious about recycling these scraps because they were worried that the pieces might leak out and be used for counterfeiting. But they finally turned things around geniusly and also perfectly aligns with today's ESG trends, especially when it comes to eco-friendly recycling, which is exactly why consumers are absolutely loving it. So by doing this, they managed to effectively recycle the waste and at the same time save tons of money that used to go into disposal.
Right, so what used to be a disposal problem has now become a collectible craze. So I do like the irony here, as people use less cash or finding new ways to buy pieces of it. So to get a more personal perspective on this, we're going to talk to someone who has a banknote collection. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
To help us explore the growing popularity of banknote collecting, we're joined today by Woo Jung, a banknote collector. So hello, Jung. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello. So thank you for having me in the studio today.
Thank you for coming on.
I'm a banknote collector based in Seoul.
Jung, so what kinds of banknotes do you own, and what first you got interested in collecting them?
So when I was a child, I happened to find my father's old wallet inside a wardrobe. And inside there were some old Korean and foreign coins, which looked so different from the money I was using at the time. So this really sparked my curiosity. A short while later, I went to a bank to exchange money for the first time and got a $1 bill. So that was the official start of my collecting life, and surprisingly, I've been collecting for 10 years now. Currently, I have very diverse collection. I started out mostly from European banknotes, but I gradually expanded my scope. So now I own banknotes from all over the world, including Central Asia, where I lived for a while, and South America, Africa, and so on. If I had to choose some few to brag about, so I have this 10,000 Belgian franc banknote, as you see. It's not visible that much. And this 5,000 koruna, Slovak koruna note, and Lastly, this 5,000 Austrian shilling note, which were all used before the euro was introduced. Their face value alone is worth more than hundreds of dollars, and since they've been out of circulation for a long time, more than 10 years, they're extremely rare. And by the way, as you see, you can see here the very famous figure who is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Yep.
That is so cool, by the way. So you're basically sitting in a room full of cash. That sounds like my dream.
Yeah.
So now I'm wondering, so which countries' banknotes are the most popular among collectors, and what special features set Korean banknotes apart?
It's a bit hard to give a definitive answer because every collector has their own criteria, such as someone thinks that rarity is the most beautiful things, or someone thinks the visual beauty is the most popular. However, some banknotes are universally considered dream items for collectors. Well, for example, 25,000 Sovereign Gulden issued in 2000, the pre-Euro Dutch 50 Gulden, and the current banknotes of Maldives. Personally, I think the banknotes from the Faroe Island, which is part of Denmark, are absolutely beautiful. As for Korean banknotes, they're renowned for their advanced anti-counterfeiting technology. They're considered some of the hardest bills to counterfeit in the world, thanks to the features like security threats, tactile elements you can actually feel, watermarks visible in the light, microprint, and UV reactive ink. And another unique feature is that Korean banknotes only feature historical figures from the Joseon dynasty. Unlike many foreign banknotes that show modern historical figures or kings from relatively recent history, Korea focuses on more older story. Likely it's due to political or social sensitivities.
You see, by the way, I love your cash collection. They're all neat and clean. Yeah, but what does physical cash symbolize in this digital age?
As everybody knows, the use of physical cash is definitely declining worldwide. In South Korea, the cash payment rate was only around 10% in 2025. In neighboring China, mobile payments like Alipay or WeChat Pay have become a part of daily life. You can even use them at the local markets. In Northern Europe, countries like Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, those countries are actively pushing for a cashless society. However, I believe that banknotes are more than just the methods of payment. They are cultural assets that reflect the nation's history and culture. By looking at the images on the banknote, you can learn about the country's history, culture, prominent figures, and the values of the specific era. Some banknotes are so aesthetically outstanding that someone can say that the banknote itself are works of art. And since money is not just for a specific group, but something shared by everyone in a society, I believe the banknotes can be the most universal form of culture.
I mean, you obviously have such an amazing collection, but I think for me personally, what was even more impressive was the knowledge you have about the banknotes that you own. So I personally learned so much from what you've told us today, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So we just spoke with a banknote collector about the appeal of cash collectibles, what sparked his interest in collecting banknotes, and what physical cash still symbolizes in an increasingly digital world. But banknotes aren't just pieces of paper. They can also tell us a lot about a country's identity and values, as our Zoom guest just told us. So what do the people featured on a country's banknotes really represent?
Well, a banknote is not just a collection. I think it's a kind of a treasure that he has right now. So also not a piece of paper. It's a reflection of what a country chooses to remember and celebrate for the future. In other words, they often reflect a nation's identity, values, and historical memories as well. And they are seen by millions, billions of people every single day, and also by tourists visiting their country. The figures chosen for banknotes tend to represent what a country values most. So in many cases, they feature influential figures, political figures, national heroes, monarchs, or cultural icons as well. For example, as you have seen, US dollars feature George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Chinese yuan feature Mao Zedong. Indian rupees feature Mahatma Gandhi, and Thai banknotes traditionally feature the king. And what's interesting is that some countries have chosen to celebrate scientists, writers, artists as well, recognizing the national achievements come in many different forms. So, for example, the UK has featured figures such as Alan Turing and Jane Austen celebrating achievements in science and literature as well. In countries banknotes are like a pocket-sized history book that people can carry around.
I think nowadays we've become kind of almost tired of carrying around cash. It's easy to forget the importance of it, but it is quite fascinating that something we use every day can also serve as a snapshot of a nation's history and ideals. So that brings us to Korea's own banknotes and the faces that we see on them. So our guest kind of touched upon this, but why are Korea's banknotes dominated by figures specifically from the Joseon era?
So great question. Okay, the biggest reason for this is what we call historical consensus. So Korea's modern history is deeply complex, filled with painful chapters like colonial period, the Korean War, and sharp ideological divides and everything. So because of this, picking a figure from recent history can instantly spark heated political debates and social conflicts. So it is too risky for a public medium like currency. On the other hand, these Joseon era figures have been universally respected and studied for centuries. Their achievements in languages, science, and philosophy are completely clear of modern political baggage. So by choosing them, the central bank essentially avoids national drama and uses figures that everyone can agree on as safe, uniting symbols of our national identity.
Right, so it's not just about choosing famous people, it's also about finding figures who can unite rather than divide public opinion. But still, not every choice has unfortunately been free from controversy. So why was the selection of the first woman to appear on South Korean banknote, which I feel like a lot of people were looking forward to? Why did that spark so much debate?
That's right. We're talking about the 50,000 Korean won that was made back in 2009. It features Shinsa Imdang women, and making her the first Korean woman to appear on South Korean banknote. Yes, she's a famous Korean scholar, artist, and the mother of the renowned scholar Yulgok-lee. Yulgok-lee also appears on South Korea's 5,000 note, by the way. Well, this decision was widely welcomed, first of all, because all the figures previously featured on Korean banknotes had been men. So, however, as you mentioned, it has sparked a lot of debate here in Korea. Critics argue that Shinsa Imdang image as the ideal wife, the devoted mother, might promote an outdated image, outdated view of women's role in this society. However, supporters pointed out that she was far more than just a mother, not just a devoted mother and a renowned scholar, Yulgok-lee. She was also an accomplished artist, writer, and calligrapher of her own right, whose work continues to be admired these days as well. There are lots of exhibitions about her work. So in many ways, the debate wasn't really about Shinsa Imdang herself. It was about what modern society, modern world chooses to celebrate and what they value. So after all, deciding who belongs on a banknote is really just about the past, the history. It's about the values we want to carry into our future, or the educational background as well. So a banknote may be small, but the debate behind it can be surprisingly large.
Right. So it's interesting how a single banknote can spark a broader conversation about history, gender, and values that society wants to promote. And beyond the people featured on them, there are plenty of surprising stories hidden in banknotes around the world. So what are some of the interesting banknotes from around the world that you want to share with us?
One interesting example is from Sweden. After reading this article, it was so amazing to find the truth. Well, when Sweden redesigned its banknotes in the early 2010s, it consulted the public on which figures should be featured. They actually had a survey, in fact. Well, as a result, the new notes included a remarkably diverse groups of people, ranging from authors and magicians to actors and film directors. For example, they featured Astrid Lindgren, the creator of Pippi Longstocking, alongside some of Sweden's most beloved cultural figures. As you can see, Lindgren appears on Sweden's purple banknote, so quite beautiful. And also the designers also paid pay close attention to gender balance, ensuring that both men and women were represented on the new banknotes equally. And even the reverse side of each note was carefully designed to reflect the person's life, their achievements, or connection to a particular place, the venue. So it's kind of a reminder that banknotes don't just reflect the country's history, they also reflect what a nation chooses to celebrate. After all, banknote can be a tiny museum that fits in your pocket.
And I love the idea. Some countries have turned their banknotes into a celebration of artists, actors, and cultural icons rather than just political or historical figures. But surprisingly, people aren't the only stars appearing on currency. So is it true that some countries are featuring animals on their money?
So I found it really interesting about this. So there are actually quite a few countries that do this, and the examples are beautiful as well. The classic one is South Africa. Their banknotes are incredibly unique because they feature the portrait of Nelson Mandela on the front and the famous Big Five safari animals like rhino, elephant, lion, leopard, and buffalo on the back. So it beautifully honors both their political history and wildlife heritage. And also Central American countries like Costa Rica, Brazil have some of the most colorful cash in the world. Their banknotes are basically a tribute to their rich biodiversity, featuring creatures like the monkey, the sloth, the jaguar, and so on. So these countries deliberately chose native animals that often endangered or completely unique to their land. It's their way to showing the world that this incredible nature is who we are as well, and we need to protect it.
And that, I think, is an incredible way to highlight national identity while also raising awareness about wildlife conservation. And as we've seen, banknotes can reveal far more than just a country's economy. So we also want to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, what would you like to see on a banknote? And here's what the results showed. So a majority, 59%, said they would prefer respected historical figures, while 30% chose symbolic animals. Another 11% said they would like to see sports stars or celebrities who have brought pride to the nation. So it looks like most people still prefer tradition when it comes to the faces on their money. So historical figures remain the clear favorite, but there is still also strong support for showcasing wildlife and also national heritage. Whether it's historical figures, cultural icons, or symbolic animals, banknotes clearly mean more to us than just money. So after today's discussion, Kyle, has your view on banknotes kind of changed?
Yeah, it was quite fascinating how countries use their banknotes as a form of national branding. So it feels like you can actually read the specific message that country is trying to send it to its users and to the world. So there are probably so many hidden meanings in Korean and US bills I use without a second thought every day, and stories that I've missed. So I'm definitely going to pay closer attention to them from now on.
Right. So what about you, Chia?
Me too. It has actually changed a lot of view because there's a pocket-sized history book indeed. So next time, whenever I travel abroad, I see a new banknote, I'll probably pay close attention and know the history and study about the history and the values the country chose. So banknotes may be worth reading before spending.
Right, well said. So cash may be disappearing from our wallets, but it's clearly not disappearing from our culture. From collectibles to the stories hidden in banknotes, physical money still carries meaning far beyond its face value. And even in a digital age, it seems some things are simply worth holding on to. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. My News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Kyle.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Chia.
Thank you for having me as well.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you'll only be short on cash and not what's in your bank account. We are News Generation.
It may have been the tomb of a young prince. Kmyongchong Tomb, one of Shila's ancient burial mounds. The gold crown and belt discovered here were notably smaller than those found in other tombs. The Shilla royal family is believed to have carefully prepared the tomb for a young life that ended too soon, placing a variety of grave goods within.